Hey everybody, Lindsay here, and welcome to another episode of My 5 Favorite, the show where I talk about my 5 favorite movie-related things. I don't necessarily think they are the best things, but they are my favorite things, and they are subject to change on a weekly basis. On this episode, we are talking about my 5 favorite pandemic films. This is pretty timely with all the events going on, and someone in the comments of my last video had requested this. The criteria I use to pick these films is not all of them are quote-unquote pandemic films, but they do involve some kind of disease or outbreak or world-ending scenario. So without further ado, here are my 5 favorite pandemic films. Number 5. Number 5 is kind of a crazy one. A lot of people are doing these, recommending 10 or so pandemic films to watch while we're in the middle of a pandemic. And this one I have not seen really on anybody's list, maybe one or two. And one reason that may be is because it's not a great movie by normal definitions, but it is a really fun movie. And it has a lot of interesting and creative ideas going on within the narrative. Yes, I am talking about 2008's Doomsday.
This is our city! We're gonna catch them, cook them, and eat them!
Which not a lot of people have heard of. It stars Rona Mitra and Bob Hoskins and Malcolm McDowell.
They started this fire, they can burn in it.
It's really hard to describe this film because it has so many different elements to it that you could assign to other films. Like at one point it's Resident Evil, at another point it's Aliens, at another point it's the fucking Gathering of the Juggalos. And then it's all of a sudden it's Game of Thrones. It's all over the place. And the fact that they pushed all of these different genres into an hour-and-a-half film is just crazy. Because it's just one thing after another after another. And it is available to rent on Amazon, but I would highly recommend renting the unrated version as opposed to the rated version. There's a lot more blood and gore and crazy shit that goes on in the unrated version that you're not going to see in the rated version. I mean, not huge differences like narrative-wise, but just some more blood and guts, which is always fun. Some of the special effects aren't that great, but just some of the hyped up performances, the editing is insane, and just all the different things that happen in this film without rhyme or reason is highly entertaining, and that's why it is number 5 on my list of 5 favorite pandemic films. Number 4. Number 4 is a zombie film. It's hard to make a list of pandemic movies without including a bunch of zombie films. This one is one of my favorites because it's incredibly well written, it's well shot, it's well acted, the music is great, and it really shows not so much the downside of having a zombie outbreak, but just how that will affect people and how they treat other people. I always thought that was the best part of this film, is showing how low and disgusting the human race can become after something like this happens. Yes, I'm talking about 2002's 28 Days Later.
They're infected!
Infected! Infected with what?
It stars Cillian Murphy, along with a whole host of other British actors.
They're dead. And you're gonna be next.
It's written by Alex Garland, it's directed by Danny Boyle. It's a little eerie because some of the beginning shots of an empty London kind of mirror what it looks like right now with everyone on lockdown. There's some really cool scenes in this film, like when they go shopping at the grocery store.
irradiated.
And the entire sequence where they're in the mansion with the soldiers is just incredible. That whole sequence where Jim is, you know, sneaking his way back in and the zombies are starting to get closer, and just the music, how it amps up and the tension amps up, and it's just really, really well done. And that is why it is number 4 on my list of favorite pandemic films. Number 3. Number 3 is another zombie film. It's probably one of my favorite zombie films of all time because it's fun, it's lighthearted. I really love the practical makeup effects and the characters, and it's super campy and just fun. And that is 1985's Return of the Living Dead. It's written and directed by Dan O'Bannon, who I absolutely love. He passed away from the same disease that I suffer from, Crohn's disease, so I just kind of feel a connection with him. I love everything about this film, from the way it opens up, the inciting incident with the barrels, our group of teenagers with scuzz and trash and suicide. Linnea Quigley is great in this film.
I wonder, like, what would be the most horrible way to die?
And I just love the camp in it.
That goddamn chemicals! It's all over everything! Stupid asshole! Watch your tongue, boy, if you like this job! Like this job!
And when I first saw this movie as a kid, it scared the shit out of me because the practical effects seemed so real to me, especially the tar man. And when they have that half-woman skeleton strapped down to the gurney and she's talking about how she wants brains because it kills the pain of dying and rotting.
Why do you eat people?
Not people, brains.
And it's got an awesome soundtrack.
Brains!
That is why it is number 3 on my list of 5 favorite pandemic films.
The Return of the Living Dead.
Number 2. Number 2 isn't just one of my favorite pandemic films, it's one of my favorite films of all time. It doesn't necessarily deal with a disease pandemic, but it definitely shows the fallout of what can happen to the world or a country when something devastating happens. And in this case, it's that women can no longer get pregnant. Yes, I'm talking about 2006's Children of Men.
Since women stopped being able to have babies, what's left to hope for?
I love this movie so much. Not just the story that they're telling, but the way it's directed, the way it's shot. Some of the long takes that they do in this film, especially that huge long one take when they're in the refugee camp and Clive Owen's character is trying to get to Key and the baby, and he's dodging bullets and there's tanks and explosions and rifle fire going on all around him, and the camera is following him through this war zone and up into the hospital and that whole battle there, and then coming back down with all the soldiers waiting, and as he leaves the hospital everything explodes. It's just incredible to watch, and the logistics of that had to be just a complete nightmare, and it still boggles my mind how they pulled everything off in that film. From that scene to the ambush in the car scene, just so much technical proficiency in this film, and it's awe-inspiring to watch. This film also got an Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay, and I actually read the book, and the book is so different from the movie. I mean, there's still some of the same characters, but the events that happen are completely weird and absolutely 100% not what happens in the movie. I mean, it's still a very good book. It's by P.D. James, but yeah, the different, it's like night and day. It's barely even the same story. Pretty much all they took was the skeleton of these characters are dealing with the fact that women can no longer give birth. That's about the only similarities. And you cannot beat Michael Caine as Jasper the Stoner. It's just great. And that is why it is number 2 on my list of favorite pandemic films. Number 1. Number 1 is also one of my favorite films of all time. It doesn't necessarily deal with a pandemic, but what could potentially turn into a worldwide pandemic, world-ending thing. It's very isolated and a very small story told with few characters, but with very, very large implications. Yes, I'm talking about 1982's The Thing.
For 100,000 years, it was buried in the snow and ice. Now it has found a place to live. Inside.
Starring Kurt Russell, Wilford Brimley, so many other awesome actors. Directed by John Carpenter. And as you can see by the posters behind me, I don't care for Kurt Russell or John Carpenter at all. I have a Thing poster on the wall over there. I want to put them all like together in one area so I can call it the Wall o' Kurt or the Wall o' Carpenter. But yes, The Thing is probably one of my favorite films. The only film I probably like more than The Thing is Jaws. Jaws will forever and always be my favorite film of all time. It's fucking perfect. But getting back to The Thing, there's so many reasons to like this film. The performances are amazing. The cinematography is done by Dean Cundy. It's awesome because in an environment where there's just snow and this research facility, it can get pretty visually boring at times, you would think, but it's not all white and bland. There's purples and blues and oranges all throughout this film. So it's actually very gorgeous to look at. And also the practical effects that are done in this film are outstanding. Most of them still hold up to this day. There's only 1 or 2 instances where the cracks start to show. But for the most part, those practical effects are still phenomenal. This film not only deals with, the alien infection, but also how humans behave, how they're selfish and suspicious and not trusting, and the fear that goes along with that. Especially with all of us cooped up inside, this film really mirrors that. Because these men are stuck in a place where they don't know who is and who isn't infected, and they have no means of escape.
If it takes us over, then it has no more enemies. Nobody left to kill it. And then it's won.
And all those reasons and many more is why The Thing is my number 1 favorite pandemic film of all time. Well, that is going to do it for this video on my 5 favorite pandemic films. Thank you to Marietta Corsini for requesting this. I hope everyone is staying safe and staying healthy. But that is going to do it for this video. So until next time, this is Lindsay signing off. I'll check you later.